afternoon and welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie and today we're going to talk a little bit about planning or lack thereof. Sometimes I have an issue with finding new plants that I really want. Most of the time I can control myself. I'll walk my yard before I click that buy button or purchase it or even go to the nursery actually and notice that there really isn't a lot of room right now to add more plants. I am planning on redoing my front yard, so eventually there'll be more room for new plants, but right now there's not a lot. Well, I gave in to temptation. I think it was around June when I found a new plant that I absolutely had to have. I read all about it, I knew the size it was going to get, and I clicked that buy button anyway. So let me show you what I got. So this is my new baby. It's called Toona Sinensis or Chinese Mahogany. Now when I clicked the buy button, I did do a lot of research on it. It's not grown a lot in the United States, so I don't even know if it's really actually going to survive in my yard. Although the prospects look pretty good. The Chinese mahogany will get probably 20 feet tall or maybe a little bit more if you let it, and it will get probably about 15 feet wide. It grows by runners, so who knows how invasive it's going to be. I just thought it was beautiful. It's also an edible plant. You can eat the new growth in the spring. The new growth in the spring is also brilliant pink, which is part of the reason why I wanted to buy it. I'm not generally a pink person, but I thought that pop of color in the spring would be absolutely gorgeous. Now, I did read that you can keep these shorter by cutting them and using them just as a harvest crop. So I walked my yard now that I have it in my hand and realized I really do not have a spot for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it in a spot that is actually the only spot that is open, and hopefully it will survive the winter. And if it does, then when I redo my yard possibly next spring, I can transplant it to a better spot. So let me show you where I'm going to put it. This right here is my path into the garden for my wheelbarrow. Well, I guess I could use this little area between the plants to take the wheelbarrow up, to the top of my garden. But this area right here is also the only spot that's open for a plant of this size. It may take me a couple of years to get my front yard redone. We'll see how the finances and energy works. So, because this is the only open spot, this is where this is going to get planted, and we'll see how it goes. Let's get planting. Okay, so this is a relatively small plant. It doesn't need to be planted, I don't need to dig a huge hole for it. It doesn't really need fertilizer this late in spring, but I am just going to add a little bit just out of habit, which, well, I'll have to think about that. Another good reason to plant it here is this is where all the mulch kind of migrates to at the bottom of the hill. It's got really good soil. So we'll see I'll show you what the hole looks like. Here's the hole that we're going to put it into. I decided to go with the wisdom I actually have, that you do not need to put fertilizer in the hole, especially in the fall with a tree. I really don't want to spark new growth, so I'm not going to put fertilizer in the hole like I previously thought I would. This spot is also really good. You can see how rich the soil is. It's also good because it does get hit a little bit with the lawn sprinklers. And from what I've heard, the Toona Sinensis does need a little more irrigation. So let's get it planted. Now if you notice, this root ball does not have any circling roots. It's looking really nice. So I really am not going to need to rough it up a little bit. Matter of fact, it's kind of a delicate ball and I don't want to tear out the important roots. So I'm going to leave it as is. It can help a lot to look at the root. You also do not want to plant these plants too deeply. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but right here is where the roots start. Maybe you can see. You do not want the soil to go any higher than this area. You'll start to suffocate the tree. Do not plant it up here. Let's plant this. Okay, so one way to tell if you're planting it too deep or not, is to take, a stick or a shovel or something and test the height of the soil with the height of the root ball as you're planting it. This right here, I think, will be exactly perfect. So we're not going to bury the base of this plant too deeply. Now, if you look really carefully, I have not put the mulch up against the base of the tree. I've left a little area around it, but I moved the mulch around the outside, covering the root ball a little bit, but I've moved it away from the base of the tree. So this tree will get the water conservation benefits of mulch without rotting out the plant. The next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of water. So one big question I get a lot is, how much do you water new plants? Now it varies. It depends on if it's a tree or a shrub, perennial, annual. Each type of plant needs different amounts of water. It also depends on the time of year. Right now it's September, mid-September, and the days are getting a lot cooler, we're getting more rain. So what I'm going to have to do with each and every plant that I plant is test the soil. Just come and look at it. Dig a little bit around it, see how moist the soil is. If it's sopping wet, I really don't want to rot it out. But since it's a new plant, I don't want it to dry out at all. So I'll just wait until the top, maybe 1/4 of an inch of the soil dries out a bit, and then water it again. The time that is most crucial, and you'll be a little surprised at this, but the time when it is most crucial to watch the water for a new plant that is planted in the fall is over the winter. This plant is going to only be actively growing for maybe another 6 weeks. The roots, I have heard, will, depending on the plant, will be active in the winter and will be taking up water for the plant so it doesn't dry out. But it doesn't have a lot of water needs, but it still does need water. So if we have a dry winter, I will be checking this plant to make sure that the soil around it does not dry out completely, and we'll end up watering it maybe once a month if we don't have any moisture. If there's snow cover, I do not need to worry about it. So if you're going to plant an entire landscape in the fall, you need to watch and understand your watering system. Are you going to be able to keep water on those plants if you have a dry winter, especially if you have secondary irrigation that has been turned off in October? So think about that. Do you have a hose that's not going to freeze? Do you have, can you bucket water everything that you plant if it is necessary? Watch the plants and make sure that they get enough water over the winter. The other thing to make sure of is just before we get a heavy freeze, for my newer plants and my more sensitive plants, especially evergreens, I will make sure to do a really heavy watering, which most people don't think about because they've had a lot of moisture. But especially evergreens and newer plants, have a chance of dying by dehydration over the winter if there's not enough water. If the ground freezes and there's no moisture around the roots, they're not going to be able to get the water that they need. Another thing you can do with evergreens is spray them with an anti-desiccant. What that does is it helps the leaves stop the transpiration of water or reduce it so that they don't dehydrate over the winter. So anyway, we will see what happens with my Toona Sinensis, this plant that I didn't think about too carefully, but I'm really excited that I have. And I'm excited to see what happens with it. So if you enjoy my videos, please subscribe, share them with your friends. I would love to continue doing these videos, but I do need to know that people, that they're helpful. Go out, enjoy the wonderful fall weather, plant some plants, clean up your garden, and have a wonderful garden adventure.